soil under the fingernails. That is where this starts. Not in a clinic, not in a study, but in the small dark line of earth that sits under the nails of someone who was outside this morning before the rest of the street woke up. Look at those hands for a second. They are not young. The knuckles are wider than they used to be. There is a scar across one thumb from something that happened decades ago. And yet the person attached to them has not had a real cold in years, sleeps through the night without trying, and has not sat in a waiting room for anything serious in longer than they can remember. By the time this ends, you will know exactly why that is. Not a vague theory, a specific thing, living in ordinary garden dirt, that does something measurable to the human body. Something a whole generation of us has accidentally cut ourselves off from without ever deciding to. And by the last minute, you will understand why the people who handle soil almost every day tend not to get sick the way the rest of us now do. Hold that picture, the hands, the dark line under the nails. We come back to it at the very end, and by then it will mean something completely different to you than it does right now. Because here is the strange part. For most of human history, nobody thought any of this was worth noticing. Touching the ground was just life. You grew food or you went hungry. You had dirt on you the way you had skin on you. Nobody wrote it down. Nobody studied it. It was too ordinary to see. The most important things usually are. And then in the span of about 2 generations, almost all of us stopped. We moved indoors. We sealed the windows. We paved the yard and called it low maintenance. We bought our food wrapped in plastic from a shelf under a light that never turns off. And we washed our hands of the earth so completely that an entire childhood can now pass without a single afternoon spent with fingers pushed into the ground. Think about that. There are grown adults today who have genuinely never held a handful of living soil. Not once. We told ourselves this was progress. Cleaner, safer, more convenient. And in many ways it was. I am not going to stand here and tell you the old days were perfect, because they were not. But somewhere in that same stretch of years, something else started happening to our bodies. Quietly. The kind of thing that does not show up as one dramatic event, but as a slow drift you only notice if you step back far enough. More allergies than any generation before us has ever recorded. More of the small autoimmune troubles that doctors 100 years ago almost never saw and now see every single day. More of the low, gray, hard-to-name unwellness that so many people over 40 now carry around like a second coat they forgot they put on. And the people who never stopped touching the soil, the ones still out in the garden in their 70s and their 80s, knees in the dirt, hands black to the wrist by 9 in the morning, they mostly do not have it. That is not a coincidence. There is a reason, and the reason was hiding in the dirt the whole time, in plain sight where nobody thought to look. Here is what I want you to notice before we go any further, because most people guess wrong. The reason is not exercise. It is not simply fresh air. It is not even the vegetables, as good as those are for you. All of those things matter, and we will touch every one of them. But none of them is the secret. The secret is something smaller, something you cannot see, cannot taste, cannot buy in a bottle no matter how much you are willing to pay. Something that travels from the soil into the body through the simple act of touch. And once it is inside, it quietly changes how the whole machine runs. Scientists found it almost by accident. And this is the part that still gives me pause. They were not even looking for it. They were trying to do something completely different with a completely different goal on people who were dealing with something completely unrelated. The result was so strange, so far outside what they expected, that at first nobody believed it. They assumed they had made a mistake. They had not made a mistake. We will get to exactly what they found and what it means for you, standing in your own kitchen tonight. That is the promise I made you in the first minute, and I will keep every word of it before we are done. But not yet, because to understand why it matters so much, you first have to understand what we actually lost when we walked indoors and shut the door behind us, and why our bodies have been quietly asking for it back ever since. So go back to those hands, the dark line under the nails, the person who has not been properly sick in years and does not even find that remarkable. What is actually in that dirt? Kneel down for a moment, slower now, lower than before. Let your knees take the weight the way they were built to. Put your hand flat on a patch of garden soil the morning after rain. It is cool against your palm. It gives a little soft and yielding in a way that pavement never is. And it smells of something deep and good, that particular smell that arrives the moment the first drops hit dry ground after a long warm spell. The smell almost everyone on earth quietly loves and almost nobody can name. You know exactly the one I mean. You felt your shoulders drop a little just reading about it. That smell has a name, and it is a clue. Hold on to it because we come back to it near the very end, and it turns out to matter far more than you would ever guess from something so small and so common. Now here is the thing your eyes will never tell you, no matter how hard you look. In a single handful of that soil, in the amount you could close your fist around, there are more living organisms than there are people on the entire planet. Let that sit for a second. Billions of living things. In one handful of what we casually call dirt and scrub off our hands as fast as we can. Most of them are bacteria. And here is where almost everyone flinches, because most of those bacteria are not your enemy. We have been taught our whole lives to recoil at that word. Bacteria, germs, something to kill, to wipe, to spray, to sanitize. An entire aisle at the store is built on that single flinch, on the promise of killing 99.9% of something we were taught to fear without ever being told what most of it actually does. But the bacteria in healthy living soil are not the bacteria that make you ill. They are very nearly the opposite kind. They are the oldest companions the human body has ever had. We grew up beside them over millions of years, with our hands and our bare feet and our food in constant, unbroken contact with the ground. Our bodies did not merely tolerate them. Our bodies came to expect them, to rely on them, to build themselves around the assumption that they would always be there. And one of those organisms in particular is the quiet heart of this whole story. I'm not going to name it yet. I will, and when I do it is going to sound almost disappointingly small, a single creature with a long, unglamorous name you will forget by tomorrow. But this one specific microbe, common as mud, present in nearly any garden on Earth, does something to the human body that we are only now, after all this time, beginning to understand. It speaks to the immune system. It speaks to the brain. And here is the strange part, the part that took everyone by surprise. It speaks to both of them at the same time, in the same visit. When researchers first stumbled onto what it could do, the story goes that they thought they had made a mistake somewhere in the lab. The result was too clean, too strong, too tidy to be real. It was the kind of finding you do not dare publish until you have run it again 3 more times, because you are certain something went wrong with the equipment or the method or the math. Nothing had gone wrong. The dirt was simply doing what dirt has always done. We had just stopped being there to receive it. Here is the part I want to sit with you on tonight. This organism cannot help you through a screen. It cannot reach you through a sealed double-glazed window or a bag of supermarket lettuce that has been washed 3 times before it ever touched your basket. It lives in the ground, only in the ground. It gets into the human body the old way, the only way it has ever known, through contact, through breathing the air just above freshly turned earth, through the small, unavoidable, completely ordinary transfer that happens when bare hands work real soil, and a trace of it ends up on the skin, in the breath, and eventually somewhere deep inside. Which means that the precise moment a generation stopped touching the ground, that same generation also quietly stopped receiving the one thing the ground had been handing the human body, free of charge, asking nothing in return, for as long as there have been human beings to receive it. We did not decide to give it up. That is what I keep coming back to. Nobody sat us down and warned us we were trading anything away at all. There was no moment of choice. We just washed our hands, came inside out of the weather, and closed the door behind us because it was cold. And the body, which had been quietly counting on that contact for 1,000,000 years, was suddenly left standing there without it, still holding out its hand. So what happens to a body that loses something it spent that long learning to expect? That is where this turns. Because the answer is not what most people think, and it is the opposite of what we were promised. Picture a kitchen, a good one, the kind you would be proud to have someone walk into unannounced, bright, wiped down, everything put away in its place. Under the sink there is a row of bottles standing like soldiers. Antibacterial spray, antibacterial soap, Wipes for the counter, separate wipes for the hands, and now a special wipe just for the phone. The bin has a lid that closes on its own so your fingers never have to touch it. The window above the sink has not been opened in weeks, maybe months, because the air comes from a vent now, and opening a window just lets the heat out. This is a clean home. By every single standard our grandparents would have understood, it is spotless, immaculate, and the people who live in it are, by the cold, honest numbers, among the cleanest human beings who have ever drawn breath on this planet. They are also, by those same cold, honest numbers, getting sick in ways their grandparents almost never did. Here is a fact that should genuinely stop you where you stand. In the parts of the world that became the most sanitized, the most indoor, the most thoroughly wiped down, rates of allergies and asthma and autoimmune conditions did not hold steady. They did not even rise gently. They climbed steadily and relentlessly, decade after decade, in almost perfect lockstep with how clean and sealed and indoor our lives became. The cleaner we got as a society, the more our own immune systems began turning around and attacking us. Read that again. The cleaner we got, the sicker, in this particular way, we became. That is the paradox sitting right at the center of this whole story, and it refuses to go away. We did everything we were told. We followed every instruction on every label. We scrubbed and sealed and sterilized and bleached. And in this one crucial respect, our bodies got worse, not better. The reward for all that effort was an entirely new category of illness. For a long time, nobody could explain it. It made no sense at all. More cleanliness was supposed to mean less disease. That was the entire logic we had built the modern home around, the promise stamped on every bottle under that sink. Then a handful of researchers started asking a question that sounded almost backwards, almost rude. What if the problem is not that we are too dirty? What if the problem, the real one, is that we have become far, far too clean? To see why that is not as mad as it sounds, think about what the immune system actually is. Most people picture it as a wall, a fixed barrier you either have or you do not. But it is nothing like a wall. It is much more like a young animal that has to be raised patiently over years. It learns almost entirely by encounter. Every harmless speck of the outside world it meets in early life teaches it one small lesson. This is fine. This one is a friend. This you can safely ignore. Over thousands and thousands of these tiny encounters, it slowly grows into something wise and calm and steady, something that has learned, in its bones, the difference between a real threat and a harmless stranger passing by. Now take that same young animal and raise it instead in a sealed bright room. Give it almost nothing to meet. No soil, no animals, no open windows, no bare feet on grass, no handfuls of the living, breathing world. What you get at the end is not a stronger immune system, the way we assumed. You get a nervous, jumpy, badly schooled one. One that never learned what is harmless because it never met anything harmless, so now it panics at everything that comes near. Pollen, which never hurt anyone. Dust, ordinary food. Cat fur. And eventually, in the worst cases, the cells of the body it was supposed to protect. That is the immune system of the cleanest generation in human history. Powerful and completely unschooled. Picture a guard who was handed a weapon and posted at the gate but never once told who the enemy actually is. So he draws on everyone. The postman, the neighbor, the family coming home. He cannot tell the difference because no one ever taught him, because we cleared away every teacher he had. And the living soil, the ground we so reasonably walked away from, was the single greatest school that immune system ever had. The main campus, the place where most of the lessons happened. You can already feel where this is going. The microbe I still have not named was one of the head teachers in that school. Maybe the head teacher. When we stopped touching the ground, we did not just lose a little dirt off our hands. We quietly pulled an entire generation of children out of the only classroom that could ever have taught their immune systems how to stay calm. But losing the soil does something else too. Something that has nothing whatsoever to do with germs or immunity, and everything to do with how you feel on an ordinary gray Tuesday afternoon when nothing in particular is wrong, and yet nothing feels quite right either. Slow down here. This one lives closer to home than the others. This one is about you, not them. Imagine for a moment that you could see inside your own body the way you can stand at a fence and see a garden. Not the organs, not the bones, not the things in the diagrams. Something more like a landscape. Rolling hills and shaded valleys of living things, trillions of them, packed mostly into the long dark coil of the gut. All of them somehow part of you, and yet strangely not quite you. This is not a poetic flourish. It is real, and it is measurable, and it is sitting inside you right now as you listen. You are carrying a garden inside your own body, a vast living population of bacteria so large it actually outnumbers your own human cells. And like any garden anywhere, it can be rich and varied and humming with life, or it can be thin and starved and struggling to hold on. A rich inner garden has hundreds upon hundreds of different kinds of life growing in it, all in balance, all keeping each other in check. A poor one has only a handful, the same few hardy weeds crowding out everything else because nothing arrived to compete with them. And here is what we have learned slowly, and with a great deal of surprise along the way. The richness of that inner garden tracks almost everything about how well a person actually is. Their digestion, obviously, yes, but also their weight, in ways diet alone cannot explain. Their mood day to day, how calm or how anxious they tend to run, how deeply they sleep, and how much of that low, smoldering background inflammation they carry, the slow fire that sits quietly underneath so many of the diseases we learn to fear after the age of 40. So what feeds that inner garden? What is it exactly that makes it rich instead of thin, a meadow instead of a bare patch? Variety. Variety from the outside world. The more different living things your body brushes up against, breathes in, and takes in through what you eat, the more different kinds of life take root and flourish inside you. And for almost the whole of human history, the single greatest source of that variety by a distance was the ground and everything that grew up out of it. The person with soil under their nails is not just receiving that one famous microbe I keep promising to name. They are receiving hundreds of different kinds, all day, every day. Off the carrots they pull and rinse but never quite perfectly scrub. Off the skin of an apple picked from their own tree and eaten standing right there beneath it. Off their own hands at the end of a long morning before they have washed for lunch. Off the thick green air of a greenhouse heavy with the smell of things growing. Their inner garden is fed, generously and constantly, by the outer one just beyond the back door. The person standing in that bright sealed kitchen is eating food that was washed, peeled, processed, packaged, and stripped of nearly everything living long before it ever reached their plate. Their inner garden is being handed the same narrow, sterile diet over and over and over again. And so, slowly, quietly, without any drama at all, it thins. The variety drops away. The meadow becomes a lawn, and then the lawn becomes a square of bare, worn earth. Here is the number that has stayed with me ever since I read it. Studies that went and compared the inner gardens of people still living close to the land with those of people living fully sealed modern lives found that the land dwellers carried dramatically more variety inside them. Not a little more. Not a polite 10%. Strikingly, visibly more. Roughly the same difference you would see standing between a wild summer meadow loud with insects and a square of suburban lawn that gets mown flat every single Saturday, whether it needs it or not. And now remember the immune system from a moment ago. The untrained, jumpy young animal, the guard who draws on everyone. Here is the connection almost no one makes. The vast majority of that immune system does not live in your blood or your bones. It lives right there, wrapped intimately around that inner garden in the gut, in constant conversation with it. The two are not separate stories at all. They are the same story told from two angles. A rich, varied inner garden quietly raises a calm, well-schooled immune system. A thin, starved one raises a frightened, trigger-happy one. So the soil does not touch you only once, the way you might have assumed. It touches you twice over. Once through the skin and the breath, training the guard at the gate. And once again through everything you grow and harvest and eat, feeding the living garden within. Now hold both of those threads together in your mind, because we are about to add a third one. And the third thread is the strangest of all three, the one that took the scientists themselves the longest to believe. Because this one does not act on the body at all. It acts on the mind. There is a kind of knowing that does not live in the head. We have almost no language for it anymore, but you have felt it. Watch someone who has gardened their whole life pick up a handful of soil. They do not look at it first. They do not analyze it. They feel it. They close their fingers slowly around it and they know, instantly and without a single word, things it would take a laboratory half a day and a row of machines to measure. Whether it is too wet to work, whether it has gone tired and needs feeding, whether something will take root and thrive there, or sulk and struggle and fail. The hands know all of it before the mind has even begun to form a sentence about it. We have forgotten, almost completely, how much of a human being is built to live and learn and settle through the hands. Think for a moment about what those hands evolved across all those years to actually do. Dig, grip, twist, sort seed from stone by touch alone in the half-light. Press a fragile root down into the ground and firm the warm earth gently around it so it would hold. For very nearly the entire human story, the hands were in close contact with the textured, varied living world for most of every single waking day. Bark and soil and cold water and leaf and smooth stone and warm fur and dry grain. A constant, rich, unbroken river of touch flowing up the arms and into a brain that was built, from the very beginning, to be fed by exactly that river. Now look honestly at what the modern hand actually touches all day long. Glass. A flat, cold, perfectly smooth rectangle of glass, swiped a few thousand times before lunch and a few thousand more before bed. Plastic. A keyboard worn shiny. A steering wheel. Surfaces engineered deliberately to feel like almost nothing at all, because nothing is easy to clean and easy to manufacture and easy to replace. So the brain that was built across a million years on a wide, rich river of touch is now being fed a thin trickle of the very same flat, dead sensation, over and over and over. And here is the thing, the brain notices. It does not have a word for what is missing, any more than your patient hands have a word for good soil. But it registers the absence the way a houseplant registers a window that faces the wrong way. Not as sharp pain, nothing so clear as that. As a slow, quiet, constant leaning towards something it can sense is out there and cannot quite reach. This is why so many people, when they finally put their hands back into the earth after years away, describe the exact same feeling and reach for the exact same word for it. Not excitement, not fun, relief, a settling, the feeling of a long-held breath that you did not even know you were holding, finally let all the way out. People who have not gardened in 30 years, who only knelt down to humor a friend or fill an idle afternoon, push their fingers into the cool soil and feel something deep in the chest quietly loosen and unclench. Something they had stopped noticing was clenched at all, because it had been clenched for so long it had come to feel like the normal shape of being alive. That feeling is not sentiment. It is not nostalgia tricking you. It is recognition. It is a body meeting, after a long absence, an old friend it had quietly given up for lost and grieved without ever naming the grief. And here, finally, is where all three threads begin to braid together into one rope. The microbe I keep promising you, the quiet one living in the soil, does not only train the immune system at the gate. It does not only help feed the garden within. When the hands break the ground and that organism makes its small, ordinary way into the body, it appears to travel all the way up the long roads of the body to the brain itself, to the very chemistry of mood, the chemistry of whether a gray Tuesday feels gray or feels fine. The hands touch the soil touches the blood, and somewhere far upstream of all of it, something quietly shifts in how a person feels about simply being alive on that particular day. For a very long time that sounded like a fairy tale, and serious people treated it like one. Touch some dirt, feel better. It was exactly the kind of soft, hopeful claim that the clever and the educated rolled their eyes at and moved quickly past on their way to something more rigorous. Then someone actually ran the experiment, not on a romantic hunch about gardens, by complete accident while seriously trying to treat something else entirely, something grave. And what came back from that experiment was the result I told you about at the start, the one that was too clean to believe. We are almost there now. I can almost hand it to you. But first you have to see, plainly and step by step, what one single ordinary morning in a garden actually does to the inside of a human body, hour by hour, system by system. because that is the moment this whole thing stops sounding like a pleasant story and becomes impossible to wave away. It is just after 6 in the morning. The light is still low and coming in sideways, the kind of thin early gold that only lasts an hour and that most people sleep straight through their entire lives. There is dew on everything, beating silver on the grass and trembling on the edges of the leaves. The garden is almost completely quiet, only birds. Someone steps out the back door with a cup of coffee in both hands. They set it down on the step where it will sit and slowly go cold and be forgotten. They look at the garden for a moment. Then they kneel down to begin. Watch closely now what happens inside that body over the next single hour. Not the part you can see from the kitchen window. The part underneath. The part that no one ever watches. The very moment the skin meets the cool morning air, and that low early light strikes the eyes, a clock buried deep in the brain quietly resets itself. That light, and especially this particular low gold morning light, tells the body what time it actually is more precisely and more honestly than any alarm clock ever invented. It tightens and tunes the great daily rhythm that governs sleep. Which means that tonight, 16 hours from now, long after this morning is forgotten, this person will grow tired at the right time and sink into deep sleep without any effort at all, without lying awake, without reaching for anything to help. That one quiet hour kneeling in the garden is, right now, silently buying a good night's sleep that has not even arrived yet. As the kneeling and the reaching and the digging begin in earnest, the body starts to move in the exact way it was actually designed to move and almost never gets to any more. Not the hard, repetitive, joint pounding of a gym machine. The slow, varied, awkward, whole-body effort of real and useful work. Squatting and rising, lifting and carrying, twisting to reach, bending and stretching and balancing. The blood begins to move properly through all of it. And the joints, which it turns out hate stillness far more than they ever hated honest effort, finally get the slow, loaded movement they have been quietly aching for through all those hours in the chair. And now the bare hands go down into the soil, and the part we have been circling for this entire time finally begins. That harmless soil microbe enters the body, quietly, invisibly, exactly as it has for a million years. And within a window of time that researchers have genuinely watched and measured, the brain begins to produce more of the one chemical most tied to calm, steadiness, and an even keel of mood. The very same chemical, and this is not a loose comparison, that the most widely prescribed antidepressants on Earth are specifically designed to keep around in the brain a little longer. The garden is doing, gently and patiently and from the outside in, something close to what a little pill does from the inside out. No prescription, no pharmacy, no cost, just hands and ground and morning. At the very same time, something else is falling. The stress hormone, the one that so many people over 40 are quietly running on all day long, every day, the one that keeps the shoulders hunched up somewhere around the ears and the jaw tight without their ever noticing. It begins slowly to drop, not because anyone decided it should, not through willpower or breathing exercises. It falls because the body is finally doing the precise thing it has always read, deep in its oldest wiring, as the signal that everything is going to be all right. Bare hands working in the earth. Slow, unhurried, purposeful work. Soft morning light on the back of the neck. These are the ancient, wordless signs of a life that is safe and fed and going to make it through another season. An hour passes, though the person kneeling there barely notices it go. The coffee on the step has long gone cold and been completely forgotten. Eventually they sit back on their heels, then stand, knees and back complaining and cracking, one hand pressed to the small of the back, and they look down at a patch of dark turned earth that simply was not there an hour ago. Now tally up what just happened inside that one body in that one quiet hour, without a single prescription, without spending a single coin. It reset its sleep clock for the night to come. It moved the way it was built to move and fed its starving joints. It lowered the stress chemistry that quietly corrodes a body over the years. It raised the calm chemistry that holds a mood steady. It took in a fresh living dose of the world that trains the immune system at the gate and feeds the garden within. Every single one of those is something a doctor might otherwise try to address one at a time, in a separate appointment, with a separate pill and a separate side effect. The garden did every last one of them at once, quietly, for free, before breakfast, before the rest of the street had even opened its curtains. Now do the only piece of arithmetic that really matters here. Multiply that one ordinary morning by every morning for 30 years. 10,000 mornings. That right there is the entire difference between the person with soil under their nails and the rest of us standing in the bright, clean kitchen. It was never one big dramatic thing we missed. It was one small, quiet thing, repeated 10,000 times, until it slowly became an entirely different body and an entirely different life. So who are these people? The ones who somehow never stopped. Let me take you to meet one of them because she is the whole story standing up and walking around. There is a woman I want you to see clearly. And the strange thing is that you almost certainly already know someone very like her, even if you have never once thought about her in this particular way. She is past 80 now. She lives at the edge of a town that has slowly grown up and out around her over the decades without ever quite reaching her, leaving her house a little marooned at the end of the lane. Behind that house, there is a garden that is, frankly, far too big for one person to manage alone, and she works it anyway. Every single day the weather allows it, and a fair few days it plainly does not, when any sensible person would stay inside. Her hands are the first thing you notice and the last thing you forget. Strong, broad, marked with decades of small scars, and the deep lines that only real work carves. The nails always carrying that same faint dark line of earth no matter how she scrubs. When she takes your hand to shake it, you can feel a lifetime of work living inside the grip. She has buried a husband from that house. She has watched nearly everyone she started out with grow frail or fade or go. She has every reason on paper, every box ticked, to be one of those older people who slowly fold inward, shrink down, and quietly disappear from their own lives long before they actually die. She is nothing of the sort. She is sharp as winter air. She remembers your children's names and asks after them by name, and remembers what you told her last time. She gets properly sick maybe once a year, catches whatever is going around, and then shrugs it off in 2 or 3 days like someone half her age, while the rest of the town nurses the same bug for a fortnight. The pharmacy does not know her well, which in a town that size says everything. She moves slowly, yes, but she moves all day, and she will quietly outwork a visitor half her age out there among the beds until the sun is high, and it is time for lunch. Nobody studies her. Nobody ever has. There are no researchers at her gate with clipboards. She is just the old woman with the remarkable garden at the end of the lane, the one people slow down to admire from their cars. But she is the entire point of everything we have been building toward. She is the living proof, standing right there in her boots. Because she has been doing, without a single day of instruction, without ever reading one study or hearing one word of any of this, the exact thing this whole story is about. Every morning her bare hands go down into living soil. Every single day her immune system meets the patient training it needs to stay calm. Every day her inner garden is fed by food she grows and then eats within hours, sometimes minutes, of pulling it from the ground. Every morning her sleep clock resets itself in that low gold light, her stress chemistry quietly drains away, her calm chemistry rises to meet the day. She has been taking the most powerful medicine I know of, faithfully, every morning for 60 years and more. And she never once in her life called it medicine. She called it the garden. She called it getting on with things. And here is the part that should land the hardest, the part that lifts this above one lucky woman at the end of one lane. She's not unusual among people like her. Not at all. Go and look at the places on this earth where human beings reliably live the longest and stay the healthiest the deepest into old age. The famous handful of corners of the world quietly stuffed with people past 100 who are still sharp and still laughing. And you find the very same picture, over and over and over in every one of them. They are not in gymnasiums. They are not weighing their food or counting anything or buying anything. They are outside, most days, with their hands in the dirt, growing a real and meaningful portion of what they actually eat, well into ages that the rest of us do not even dare expect to reach, let alone reach in that kind of shape. And we looked straight at those places with all our science and all our curiosity, and we said, well, it must be the diet. It must be the good fortune of their genes. It must be the wine or the strong families or the sea air or the sunshine. We made long, careful, intelligent lists of reasons. We almost never thought to put the soil itself on the list. The actual ground, the daily contact, the microbe living in it, the simple touch, because it was too ordinary to see, sitting right there in plain view, exactly the way it has always been too ordinary for anyone to see. The most important thing in the frame and the one thing the eye slides right past. Which brings us at last, finally, all the way back to that microbe. Because someone did, in the end, put it under a microscope and look at it properly. And what they found there is the precise reason I asked you, all the way back in the first minute, to hold the picture of those hands in your mind and not let go of it. So here at last, here is what they found. Now the room goes quiet. Lean in. This is the part I promised you in the very first minute, and I'm about to keep that promise in full. It is the early 2000s. A group of researchers is at work, and they are not studying gardens. They are not studying longevity, or mood, or happiness, or any of the soft and hopeful things this story has circled. They are treating cancer. They are working with people who are seriously, gravely ill, and they are giving those patients a preparation made from a common, harmless bacterium that lives in ordinary soil all over the world. The long, unglamorous name I have kept from you this whole time is Mycobacterium vaccae. Say it once quietly and then let it go, because the name does not matter. What matters, the only thing that matters, is where it lives. The ground, the garden, under the nails, in that handful of dirt after the rain. They are using it purely for the immune system. The whole and entire plan is a simple one. They are hoping that this soil organism might rouse the body's defenses and help it fight the disease. That is it. That is the only thing they are looking for. Nobody in that room is thinking about feelings. And then the patients start reporting something that nobody on the team asked about, nobody measured for, nobody had any box on any form to record. They say they feel better. Not physically better, or at least not only physically. Brighter, lighter, calmer in themselves. Their mood has lifted noticeably in a way that has nothing whatsoever to do with their diagnosis or their prospects. People who are seriously and frighteningly ill are quietly describing a kind of emotional ease, a steadiness that makes no sense given everything else that is happening to them. This is the result that was too clean to believe. The one they assumed, at first, had to be a mistake. They had given desperately sick people a humble soil bacterium for their immune systems, expecting nothing more, and somehow it had reached all the way up and touched how those people felt about being alive. So another group of researchers, properly skeptical, went away to test it the rigorous way. They gave that same harmless soil organism to mice, and then they went in and watched the brain directly, where there is no hope and no expectation and no wishful thinking to muddy the result. And there it was, plain and undeniable in the measurements. The bacterium switched on the very brain cells that produce serotonin. Serotonin, the chemical of calm, of steadiness, of an even and livable mood. The exact same chemical that those most common antidepressants on Earth work so hard, so expensively, to protect and preserve. A microbe from the dirt was acting, inside the living brain, like a gentle, natural version of the drugs we line up in their millions behind the pharmacy counter. Then they turned and looked at the immune side of it, the side they had meant to study all along, and the second half of the whole story quietly closed shut like a door. That same organism trained the immune system to do the precise thing the cleanest generation has so badly lost the ability to do. It taught the guard to stay calm, to stand down, to stop overreacting to harmless strangers, to dial down the senseless, smoldering background inflammation that sits underneath so much of what goes wrong in a human body after the age of 40. It was, in the most literal and unromantic sense imaginable, one of the missing head teachers from the very school we marched our children out of and locked behind us. Stop here and hold both halves of it together in one breath, because this is the entire thing, finally whole. A single, ordinary, unremarkable creature, living in the soil of nearly any garden on Earth, free, everywhere, asking nothing. And it calms the overreacting immune system and lifts the low gray mood at the very same time in the same quiet visit. Two of the largest and most stubborn afflictions of modern life. The anxious, jumpy, inflamed body, and the flat, gray, weary mind. And one humble handful of garden dirt speaks directly to both of them at once, in a language the body has understood since long before there were words. And it gets in the old way, the only way it has ever known, through the skin of working hands, through the breath drawn in just above freshly turned earth, through hands that simply do not get perfectly scrubbed before lunch and were never meant to be. It cannot reach you through a screen, no matter how long you stare. It cannot reach you through a sealed window or a bag of leaves washed 3 times under bright lights. It comes only ever to those who actually touch the ground. And now, remember the smell. The deep, good, unmistakable smell of soil after rain. The one almost every human being on earth quietly loves and almost none can name. Here is the last turn of the key. That smell comes largely from these very organisms, from the same family of soil life that this microbe belongs to, rising up into the air the instant the rain wakes them. Which means the thing you have loved your entire life, without ever once understanding why, is the exact same thing your body has been quietly, patiently asking you to come back to all along. You were never charmed by that smell by accident or by chance. All those years, every time it stopped you at a window, you were being called home. So the person with the soil under their nails is not lucky. They never were lucky. They are simply still enrolled, still showing up, in a school that the rest of us quietly dropped out of without ever noticing we had left. Which leaves only one last question standing, and it is by far the heaviest one of all. If every word of this is true, and it is, then what on earth did we trade it all away for? Stand now in the cleanest room you can possibly imagine. Build it in your mind. White surfaces, every one of them. Filtered air moving silently through hidden vents. Everything sealed, wiped, controlled, measured, regulated. Not one living thing visible anywhere your eye lands. It is safe. It is spotless. It is, in every measurable way, exactly what we as a civilization spent the better part of 100 years and untold fortunes trying with all our might to build. And it is one of the loneliest places a human body can possibly be. Because by now you understand, in a way you did not an hour ago, precisely what is missing from that gleaming room, even though to the eye nothing at all looks missing. There is no living soil there to train the guard at the gate, no variety arriving to feed the garden within, no rich, varied texture to flow up through the hands and into a brain that quietly hungers for it every waking hour, no harmless, ancient companion rising from the ground to reach all the way up and gently steady the mood. The room has been swept entirely clean of every conceivable threat, and in our determination to clear out every last threat, we cleared out all the friends along with them. We could not tell the two apart. That was the whole tragedy in a sentence. We looked at the entire living world outside the body and we sorted it into one single category, something to be kept out. This is the price. And the strangest, saddest part of all is that almost nobody ever named it as a price while we were paying it. We called it progress every single step of the way. Cleaner food, sealed and insulated homes, paved, low-maintenance yards, hands washed and sanitized a dozen times a day. Lives lived almost entirely indoors under light that never changes. Every single one of those steps was reasonable. I want to be fair about that. Every one of them made complete sense entirely on its own, taken by itself, in the moment we took it. But the sum of all those reasonable, sensible, well-meaning steps was an entire generation slowly and quietly sealed away from the living ground that had kept human beings well for as long as there had been human beings to keep. We did not lose the soil in one dramatic, mournable moment. There was no funeral for it. We lost it the way you lose anything that truly matters, slowly, a little at a time, each small loss far too minor on its own to grieve or even notice. One paved path here, one sealed window there, one more thing bought instead of grown. Until one ordinary day you look up and realize that a child can now grow all the way up into a whole adult, having never once pushed their bare fingers into living earth. And nobody around them finds that strange. Nobody even remarks on it. That is how completely it went. Here is the question I genuinely cannot stop turning over in my hands, late at night. How many of the low, gray, nameless troubles that so many people quietly carry after 40, the broken shallow sleep, the restless circling mind, the body that overreacts to everything it meets, the constant vague sense of being subtly, untraceably unwell with nothing a test can ever find. How many of those are not really diseases at all? How many of them are simply the symptoms of a body kept too long, and too completely, away from the ground it was built around? I do not think all of them. I want to be honest and careful with you because you deserve that. The world and the body are far more complicated than one handful of dirt, and anyone who promises you a single simple answer to everything is selling you something. But I think it is more of them than we would ever be comfortable admitting to ourselves. I think we have spent decades treating the symptoms of a great separation, one pill and one appointment at a time, and calling that healthcare, while a real and meaningful part of the cure sat the whole time just outside the back door. Free, patient, waiting, exactly where it has always been, exactly where it still is. And that the fact that it is still there is the good news. This is the part I want to lift your chest right now before we finish, because it is the truest thing I will say. None of this is locked. None of it is lost for good. The school never actually closed its doors. It only lost its students. The soil is still out there right now on the other side of your wall. The microbe is still living in it exactly as it was. The smell still rises, faithful as ever, the moment the rain comes. And the garden does not care, not even slightly, how long you have been gone, or how old you are when you finally come back, or how little you think you know. It will take you the very moment you kneel down and put your hands in. You do not need acres. You do not need a large garden or a beautiful one or any garden at all to start. A few pots will do, a patch by a wall, a borrowed corner. You do not need to be any good at it, and you will not be at first, and that does not matter in the slightest. You need bare hands and real ground and a few mornings a week. That is the entire prescription, start to finish. And it has not changed by a single word in a million years. So let me take you back, one last time, all the way to where we began. Soil under the fingernails. That is where this ends, in the very same place it started. The same hands, the same small dark line under the nails. Only now you see those hands completely differently than you did an hour ago. That small dark line under the nails is not dirt to be scrubbed away in a hurry before company arrives. It is not carelessness, and it is not something to apologize for. It is the visible mark of an enrollment. It is the quiet sign of someone still attending the oldest and best school there has ever been, still meeting the living world the exact way a human body was built to meet it, still being trained and fed and steadied every single morning by something so ordinary that the rest of us never even noticed the day we let it slip out of our lives. The person attached to those hands is not sick the way we have somehow become sick, and now you know all the way down that it was never luck and never good genes and never some secret they were keeping. They simply kneel down before the street wakes. The cool dark earth gives way under the palm, soft, the way it always has. That deep good smell rises to meet them, the one that turns out, after all this, to be the very smell of the thing their body has been quietly asking for the whole time. The light comes in low and gold across the grass. The stress quietly falls away. The calm steadily rises. The guard at the gate learns one more patient lesson. The garden within is fed one more time. None of it announced. None of it sold to them. All of it utterly real and all of it free. Think about how strange that is for a moment. Everything we have been taught to want costs more the better it is. The good food costs more. The good doctor costs more. The good years, we are told, must be bought and saved for and earned. And here, the whole time, sitting just below the surface of an ordinary garden, was something better than most of it, asking for nothing at all except that we show up and put our hands in. No subscription, no appointment, no waiting list. Just the ground and the morning, and a body that still remembers exactly what to do the instant it is given the chance. And it asks so little of you to begin. That is the part I keep wanting to press into your hands before you go. Not a transformation, not a new identity, not a perfect garden out of a magazine, just a few mornings. Just bare hands and real earth, and the willingness to kneel down once and find out whether your own chest loosens the way everyone else's does. It will. That is the quiet promise the ground has kept for a million years and has no intention of breaking now, least of all for you. And the rest of us, the cleanest generation ever to feel quietly, constantly unwell. We spent all those years looking for the answer in bottles, in waiting rooms, in sealed bright rooms that smelled of nothing at all, when the thing we were searching for was lying in the ground the entire time. underneath everything, underneath the pavement we laid and the floors we built and the lives we sealed, just there, just below, waiting with endless patience for us to remember it. You can remember now. That is the whole point of an hour like this one. Not to make you afraid of how clean and indoor your life has quietly become, because fear has never once sent anyone out into a garden. The point is simpler and kinder than fear. It is to send you outside in the morning, down to your knees, with your bare hands pushed into real cool earth, to gather up what was always yours and has always, always been waiting for you to come and take it back. There is a reason you have loved the smell of the ground after rain for as long as you can remember. Your body has been trying to tell you something your entire life. It was telling you to come home,